Hello and welcome to Asian American Context and Missional Leadership, PM 544. I am Ken Uedafong, or just Ken Fong, and I am going to be your teacher this quarter. So, since this is an online class, I thought that I'd go first and share my story a bit with you in brief. My paternal grandparents arrived here from southern China, the Toisan district, in 1916, which makes me a third generation American of Chinese descent. By the time this picture was taken of my grandmother and her 5 children, my paternal grandfather had already passed away due to complications with both tuberculosis and diabetes. The son under the green arrow is my father, James King Fong. The picture starting in your upper left is how Chinese immigrants looked when they dressed up all fancy for a family portrait around this time in the 20th century. Below that is a photo taken of a Chinese immigrant living in Sacramento at the time. And then the big photo there is a picture of the Chinese Baptist mission in Sacramento, started by the American Baptist in 1934. At least this picture was taken in 1934. The reason I included the picture of Abraham Lincoln is to denote that this church that I grew up in, later called the First Chinese Baptist Church, was planted in 1860, which is when Abraham Lincoln was still the president of these United States. I love this picture because it's so historic, and that little tyke under the blue arrow in the front row with his hand in his pocket is my Uncle Henry, my dad's youngest brother, and they're kind of partially obscured by the girl standing in front of him, who's unusually tall for her age, is my dad, again under the green arrow. Fast forwarding a bit, this was during World War II. And my father served as a second lieutenant, James King Fong, as a navigator bombardier in the 351st Bomber Group in the U.S. Army Air Corps. At the time, the Air Force had not been formally created. And this is one of the little untold stories of how World War II was fought, that there were actually people like my dad. My dad actually flew 35 missions over Germany out of England and returned home a decorated war hero. When he did come home, he married my mom. Her maiden name was Wong, first name Emily. She was from Seattle. And the picture on the left is a picture of my 2 handsome parents in San Francisco Chinatown on a day trip with my older sister Melinda and myself, now under the green arrow. And yes, those are pretty much duck lips. On the right, you see a picture of myself with all 3 of my siblings. My sister Melinda was then still taller than me, than myself. My next brother, Rob, who is 5 years younger than me. And then my youngest brother, Jim, is 7 years younger than me. My all-time favorite picture from the past is this one in the middle, and that's with my paternal grandmother, my Ningyin, who lived on 9th Avenue, and our family lived on 8th Avenue. And so anytime any of us wanted to hang out, we would just take the little path carved out in the alleyway between our 2 houses. And I was my grandmother's oldest son. And one of the things that I just kind of assumed was true for all grandkids was that even though we loved each other very much, we could never actually have an actual conversation because my grandmother came from a small village in Toisan. She was illiterate in all languages, could really only speak her village dialect of Chinese, and I could really only speak English, but we definitely knew that we loved each other. Fast forward again to the early 1970s, and I was at McClatchy High School in Sacramento, and I was part of the East Wind Band, which was the first Asian American rhythm and funk band in the area. There was a group called Tower of Power out of the East Bay of Oakland that was very popular with a big horn section. And so we formed up as Asian Americans, kind of as a version of that. We had two African American lead singers, and that's me playing the flute. That was pretty cool. But I dropped out of that band when I transferred from Sac City College with my AA degree to go out to Cal Berkeley, where I earned my BA in biology in 1976. And I also was a proud member of the Cal marching band those 2 years. I was pre-med when I went to college. Soon realized that I really didn't want to be a doctor. But as kind of was typical back then, maybe even today, in an Asian American family, you had, three choices: doctor, lawyer, or failure. And so I thought I could maybe take the medical doctor thing down a notch. And I declared pre-dental. I applied my junior year while at Cal. Did not get into at the three dental schools that I had applied to. So by my senior year, here I was graduating with a degree in biology with no intention of actually working as a biologist. So I panicked and I applied to several hospital administration master's programs my senior year and didn't get into any of those either. So as a result, I graduated and returned home with my proverbial tail tucked between my legs, with no clear career path, and certainly not wanting to be a pastor. But just to kind of satisfy my dad in particular, I took the part-time job that summer as a youth director at First Chinese Baptist Church in Sacramento. And the rest, as they say, is history. I received my call to ministry in doing that youth ministry. And in 1977, went to the American Baptist Seminary of the West for that first year, and then kind of got soured on just the whole atmosphere up there in Berkeley. And so I transferred to Fuller Seminary in 1978 and finished my MDiv in 1981, and then went back in the mid-'80s to work on my Doctor of Ministry degree in Asian American Church Growth, which I was awarded in 1990. Now, you have to understand, at that time, the church growth movement was just hopping and popping, and mega churches like Saddleback and Willow Creek were just appearing on the horizon. And so this was a time for me to be filled with, I would call, mega-sized ambitions. That I could, with this doctoral degree, that I could be the Chinese version of Rick Warren. I fully embraced what is known as the homogeneous unit principle of the church growth movement, which essentially says that birds of a feather like to flock together. So if you're going to grow a big church, don't make people uncomfortable. Don't make them associate with people that they normally don't want to be with. And I could argue that with the best of them. I helped guide Evergreen Baptist Church of Los Angeles, which I joined in 1978 as a seminary intern, and then in 81 as the first associate pastor, and especially American-born Chinese of a historically Japanese-American church, to be the first English-only Asian-American church in America. And as the 90s were approaching, we were pretty big. I think we were about 1,200, which in those days was a pretty big deal. So just to encapsulate my time there at this single church since being at Fuller Seminary, again, started in 78 as an intern and retired in the summer of 2017 and became the senior pastor in the mid-90s after a quote-unquote friendly church split, a hive. And I would definitely say that when I retired, Evergreen Baptist Church of Los Angeles was not the same church. And mainly that was because I was not the same pastor. I had continued to evolve and to grow and to risk and take chances. I became clearly a missional leader. I was not just caught up in the internals of the church and the programming of the church, but I also pioneered a more Asian American narrative style of preaching, which I also teach at Fuller. And in May 2015, I became the host of Asian America, the Kung Fong podcast, which has produced a weekly episode ever since. We are fast approaching 250,000 listens in 2018. And basically, this has allowed me to continue to make connections with a wide-ranging and diverse group of Asian American culture makers and culture shapers, mostly in North America, and especially where 2/3 of my guests are typically not Christian. And it's interesting because they understand that I'm a Baptist minister, which initially for some of them is pretty much a turnoff. But if we want to have that conversation, if they do, a lot of times they're remarkably pleasantly surprised that people like me are out there, and I think that's been really good. One of the things that I continue to aspire to be, even though I've retired officially as a pastor, is to be a heroic God pleaser. And this is in no way saying that I'm trying to be some kind of standout superhero, but it has everything to do with seeing my life of following Jesus as being on, quote unquote, the hero's journey. It's something that we're going to talk about, learn about in this class. And the other half of that is that I've really learned a lot more about being a God pleaser more than a people pleaser. I think a lot of us who go into full-time ministry, whether we realize it or not, are really affected by what people say and think about us. And that was certainly true about me. And a huge breakthrough for me several years ago was to really be anchored in the fact that all of our worth is the same. It all is anchored in Christ and who we are to Christ. And it doesn't go down if we mess up or if people speak poorly of us. But it also doesn't go up just because some people happen to think we're a big deal. So that's been a huge part of fueling my courage and boldness to be a missional leader. What you're going to do in this first week is you're going to share your story in light of taking this class. And that's going to involve posting a 6 to 7 minute maximum video in response to the following questions. What's your name and where are you situated right now? And why are you there in particular? What's your current and anticipated ministry context? And I know that not all of you are Asian or Asian American. Not all of you are necessarily going to serve in a Asian or Asian American context. So I just want to hear a little bit about what that's all about as best as you understand it right now. Number 3, where in the world would you visit if someone was willing to fund your trip, and why would you want to go there? And that's just kind of a fun question to get to know you a little bit better, what makes you tick. Please don't take much longer than 1 minute to answer the first 3 questions. Don't make it more complicated than it actually needs to be. Then on to the 2 remaining and more substantive questions that I want you to spend the bulk of your time responding to. Number 4, what's the one quadrant in the Asian American quadrilateral that needs the most attention in your ongoing evolution as an impactful Asian American leader, and why? And if you haven't watched the next video where I break down the Asian American quadrilateral, this won't make any sense to you, so please watch that first. And then number 5, which of the 6 prevalent styles of Asian and Asian American leadership best describe yours? So here again, this content is found in the video that comes after this, so please watch that and take a look at the reading in the Nakanishi sections that are on eReserve, and then also share a brief personal story, and it could be a positive one or a negative one, where as you look back, you can now see your prevalent style at work. So this is just to kind of get your mind in that gear. A little bit about how this course in general is going to progress. Obviously, this is about serving in Asian American context and missional leading. Again, I understand that some of you are not Asian American and or you're not going to serve, as best you know, in an Asian American context, but you know, that's where this course is coming from. I think a lot of what you're going to learn can be altered, tweaked, and applied in many different contexts, but especially for those of us who do believe that we're going to be serving in an Asian American context. That's certainly the fundamental underlying assumption of this course. We have a primary text, which I really am excited that you're going to be working through. It's Robert E. Quinn's Building the Bridge as You Walk on It, A Guide for Leading Change. The first week, you have to basically read part 1, which is about 100 pages, which really lays the foundation for understanding the chapters that follow. And then you will have other required reading and lectures, which are different components of leading change in Asian and Asian American contexts. And some of that comes from your other required readings, and some of it comes from simply lectures that aren't tied to any of the required reading, but are things that I think you would really benefit from. And then at the end of finals week into this course, the proof of you actually learning the objectives that have been spelled out in the ECD is you're going to write a 10 to 15 page final paper based on a contextual case study out of my experience at the Evergreen Baptist Church of Los Angeles. Let's do a quick overview of the syllabus. You will have approximately 10 hours of online instructional videos that you need to watch. It's probably 3 videos a week. The required reading totals 927 pages, and you will give proof of having done that reading or at least listened to the lectures by posting a 250-word weekly asynchronous or synchronous post with video based on the reading. So the asynchronous one is written. The synchronous one, there's 3 of those. You'll actually post. You'll be involved in a kind of like a video small group, which will be offered one morning or one evening. And if you do that, then you won't have to worry about the 250-word cumulative weekly responses because those are tied to the asynchronous written ones. I think it'll give us a chance to actually interact with each other, which is important in an online environment. And then 10 short reflection papers of 2 to 3 pages each tied to the Quinn book. The most extensive one is really after reading part 1. I think there's like 7 questions that I posed there for you to kind of get at the essential content of part 1. And then after that, it's really 11 to 12 page chapters by Quinn, where he's going through the 8 fundamental aspects to be in that fundamental state of leadership. And it's really kind of like a time of being spiritually directed as a emerging leader. So please take that seriously. I think that's going to bear a lot of fruit if you do. And then finally, as mentioned before, the final paper of 10 to 15 pages, double-spaced, based on the case study, which will be up there on Canvas. Now, because this is an online class, the office hours are not going to be in an office or in person. So certainly you can email me, and we can go back and forth that way. There'll be some space on the Canvas page to actually do some of that so that some of the back and forth between some of you individual students and myself can be read and digested by everybody in the class. Or if you would like a more face-to-face-ish sort of experience with me for whatever reason, we can set up a video chat. And only if there's really an emergency, you can use my cell phone number. Just understand that I'm in the Pacific time zone. So I hope this gives you a good overview of the class, and I'm looking forward to being your instructor this quarter.